One gets nearer to the heart of truth, which I suppose is the ultimate aim of the writer, in the measure that he ceases to struggle, in the measure that he abandons the will. The great writer is the very symbol of life, of the non-perfect. He moves effortlessly, given the illusion of perfection, from some unknown center, which is certainly not the brain center, but which is definitely a center connected with the rhythm of the whole universe, and consequently as sound, solid, unshakable, as durable, defiant, anarchic, purposeless as the universe itself. Art teaches nothing except the significance of life. The great work must inevitably be obscure, except to the very few, to those who, like the author himself, are initiated into the mysteries. Communication, then, is secondary. It is perpetuation which is important. For this, only one good reader is necessary. Welcome to Positive Read-Ins. That was an excerpt from Henry Miller's essay called Reflections on Writing. It comes from the collection, The Wisdom of the Heart. This book is promoted or sold as a collection of stories and essays. However, it's mostly essays, and they range in topics from writing to film to works of literary criticism. That essay there that I read from is about writing and the process of writing. Before I get into this essay, though, I'd like to say something about my own writing. If you would like to be initiated into the mysteries that Miller is talking about in this essay, please take a look in the description. There's a link. You can order this novel, Commuting. I would appreciate the support. Please check it out. Given the nature of this book, I will not be going into or looking at all the essays here. That would be a very long video. I wanted to begin with the quote that I just read, coming from Reflections on Writing. This is a popular essay. It's mentioned on the back here. And for me, this made me think about writing in a different way. That quote, he says, "The great work must inevitably be obscure, except to the very few, to those who, like the author himself, are initiated into the mysteries." I think on one hand, we can criticize this idea. Great writing or great art probably should not be obscure. However, I think we've seen that, at least for the time period when it first comes out, there's been a lot of work that struck audiences as being obscure or strange, and it took some time for them to come around. I'm thinking specifically of the work by Herman Melville, Moby Dick. I'm thinking of William Faulkner. His novels became much more popular after his death or near the end of his life. I think we could say the same for Franz Kafka, maybe Knut Hamsun. So a number of writers who it takes time for their readers to perpetuate this idea. This point as well that Miller makes about communication being secondary, I think this is something most people who are writing think is primary, right? That we're writing a book, we're trying to communicate with an idea to someone. And Miller's saying that that's not the most important thing. That's just secondary. Really, it's perpetuating. He doesn't say what he means by perpetuation, but I take this to be the perpetuation of almost a Platonic, capital I, idea. It's a feeling, an idea that's captured in this work of art, and it's being perpetuated through these different works. And as he makes the point here, kind of a startling point, I think, is that for this, only one good reader is necessary. All it takes is one good reader to read that work and to be I guess, inspired by it and to go on to create something else. So this very much falls in line with this idea that classics, what makes a classic is a work that cannot be destroyed through criticism, and it creates other great works after it. Another essay that I'd like to look at is the essay that gives the title to this book, The Wisdom of the Heart. This essay is sort of a book review reflection of a number of books. So these are by a writer I had never heard of. This is E. Graham Howe, and he's talking about 3 books, I and Me, Time and the Child, and War Dance, but primarily he talks about war dance throughout this. I think this is important, this essay, because like a lot of Henry Miller's work, he's constantly bringing it back to his worldview, how this coheres with his worldview, and how this can show us a way to view the world. So in this quote that I'm going to read here, I think this correlates very much with how Miller sees the world, which I see in the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, and also in the Colossus of Marushi. Howe's whole point of view is based on this simple yet revolutionary idea of full and unequivocal surrender. It is the religious view of life, the positive acceptance of pain, suffering, defeat, misfortune, and so on. It is the long way round, which has always proved to be the shortest way after all. It means the assimilation of experience, fulfillment through obedience and discipline, the curved span of time through natural growth rather than the speedy, disastrous shortcut. This is the path of wisdom, and the one that must be taken eventually, because all the others only lead to it. Now, I take this view, he calls this the religious view. I think that partly because it's acceptance suffering, maybe a Christian view that he's taken here, surrender into that suffering, going the long way, doing the hard route. And he says this ends up being the shortest because it's the only real way to go. And this is a point that's brought up in all of Henry Miller's novels. I think he sees himself as an artist in those earlier works, especially, that is becoming self-actualized, but through suffering, through difficulties that he's experiencing, primarily in poverty. Another idea that's strongly linked in Miller's, I'll call it a philosophical system, is an anti-technology, anti-modernity perspective. And it would make sense based on that quote I just read, because that would be what's offering the easy way, or what Miller talks about in Tropic of Capricorn, this death rhythm, this trying to get away from death. This view also comes up with Howe. So he says here, society represents all of us, what we are and how we feel about life, as Howe puts it. Society is sick. Scarcely anybody will deny that. And in the midst of this sick world are the doctors who, quote, knowing little of reason why they prescribe for us, have little faith in anything but heroic surgery, and in the patient's quite unreasonable ability to recover, end quote. And that's a quote from Howe. The medical men, this is Miller talking, or writing, the medical men are not interested in health, but in combating sickness and disease. Like the other members of society, they function negatively. Similarly, no statesmen arise who appear capable of dealing with the blundering dictators, for the quite probable reason that they are themselves dictators at heart. Here is the picture of our so-called normal world, obeying, as Howe calls it, the law of infinite regress. So in this view, Miller, agreeing with Howe, seems to see our society as sick. We are trying to just fight sickness and disease. That's what the doctors are doing, but they're not actually trying to promote health. I think we've seen plenty of that. There's all kinds of videos out there on the, that came out of the pandemic about this. So we're not trying to promote healthy lifestyles, but just combat the disease, the sickness that comes about through the shortcut life that we have. And same thing in our politics. The statesmen, they are not trying to bring about more freedom. They themselves are dictators, according to Miller, and that's just the normal way of life they're kind of perpetuating. Another essay that stood out in here, which I'm not going to quote from, is called Rameau. Rameau is a French actor from the 20s and 30s. I'm not familiar with this actor. But what I found interesting about this essay is it reflects a great knowledge that Henry Miller has of cinema and his comparison between what the French public views as a great actor and what the American public does not come off very well in this comparison. Miller was certainly not anti-American, but he wasn't happy with American life in the 1930s. One of two or maybe three essays that could be considered stories in this collection is this very long one here in the middle called The Alcoholic Veteran with the Washboard Cranium. This seems like it could come out of Tropica Cancer or Tropica Capricorn. It's Miller out late night with a friend. They run into this veteran kind of, on hard times with all these hard luck stories, but he is a very kind of brilliant thinker in some ways, but it almost seems too good to be true, all the things he is saying. And then at the end, we have this kind of long debate between Miller and his friend whether that alcoholic veteran is actually telling the truth or not. I wonder if the character of the veteran is Miller speaking his ideas through him, or is this supposed to be the veteran just presenting his own ideas? But again, we very much get these long kind of screeds about very much anti-modern, anti-society, talking about the problems with war and politics and modern society. The veterans seem to cohere very much with how Miller thinks in his other works. A few passages here I'd like to look at. The first one, this is the veteran during one of his long kind of monologues that he has. He says, "Supposing I honestly believed in fascism or communism or polygamy or Mohammedanism or pacifism or any of the things that are now taboo in this country, what would happen to me if I started to open my trap, eh? Why, you don't even dare to protest against being vaccinated, though there's plenty of evidence to prove that vaccination does more harm than good, though not according to the CDC. Where is this liberty and freedom we boast about? You're only free if you're in good odor with your neighbors, and even then, it's not a hell of a lot of rope they give you. If you happen to be broke and out of a job, your freedom isn't worth a button. And if you're old, besides then, it's just plain misery. They're much kinder to animals and flowers and crazy people. Civilization is a blessing to the unfit and the degenerate. The others it breaks or demoralizes. As far as the comforts of life go, I am better off when I'm in jail than when I'm out. In the one case, they take your freedom away, and in the other, they take your manhood. If you play the game, you can have automobiles and townhouses and mistresses and pâté de foie gras, and all the fodderol that goes with it. But who wants to play the game? Is it worth it?" So as you can see, this seems like a quintessential Miller anti-society, iconoclastic kind of rant that he's given through this character, saying that, okay, we think we have freedom, we think we have liberty, but really that liberty is within very narrow limits. Only if our neighbors can basically put up with us. He calls that we're only free if we're in good odor with our neighbors. So if we're doing anything that makes them think that we are abnormal, then we're probably not going to have as much freedom as we think. The line that really stuck with me, though, was when he says, I'm better off in jail right? In the one case, in being they take your freedom. So when you go to jail, they take your freedom. But in society, they take your manhood. And as he says, if we're willing to play the game, we can have all these good things. Referring back to the previous passage I read, this could be the shortcut to life, or the death rhythm that Miller talks about in Tropic of Capricorn, but we lose something for that, and according to Miller, or through this character, we lose our manhood. Of course, this is precisely a topic that's maybe debatable today. What is manhood, and is our traditional ideas of manhood poisonous or not? I think Miller would not be of that modern camp today that's saying we need to change the way men are and the way they behave. A final passage I'd like to read from this story comes a bit later, when the veteran is offering a solution of what we could do to make things better. He says, "How different the new order would be if we could consult the veteran instead of the politician. But logic has it that we ordain innocent millions to slaughter one another, and when the sacrifice is completed, we authorize a handful of bigoted, ambitious men who have never known what it is to suffer to rearrange our lives." Again, this is a political argument saying that, okay, we have the regular men who go out and suffer and die, battle in these wars, and then after that's done, we have these select few he calls bigoted, ambitious, and they don't know suffering, and they're the ones that kind of organize our lives afterwards. So I think this is a damning but very accurate description of leadership, not just governmental leadership, but across the board in many industries, if you think about it. Exploring another topic, we have this essay called The Eye of Paris, which is a short essay on the French photographer named Brazaille. Again, I'm not familiar with his work, besides just some cursory looks at it online. But what stood out in this for me is, through this essay, Miller critiques art in general. That's happening a lot here. And he says, "Every man today who is really an artist is trying to kill the artist in himself. And he must, if there is to be any art in the future. We are suffering from a plethora of art. We are art-ridden, which is to say that instead of a truly personal, truly creative vision of things, we have merely an aesthetic view. Empty as we are, it is impossible for us to look at an object without annexing it to our collection. We are art-ridden. We're suffering from a plethora of art." So keep in mind, this is in the late 1930s. I believe this book was published in 1941. But here is Miller talking about how already at that time we have too much art. And the problem is with this, instead of a truly personal creative vision, we merely have an aesthetic view. So I think about art schools, commercial art, maybe in writing MFA programs. Again, not necessarily, but as a general rule, I think that might be true, that we have an aesthetic view that we're applying to the world, but not as he calls it here, a truly creative vision of things. And that would be what is getting promoted, that is these aesthetic view. And Miller thinks this is a problem. And so do I. Finally, I should talk about literary criticism. This collection has literary criticism really about just two writers. So there's, I think, about two essays that talk about D.H. Lawrence, not in any specific term. It talks a little bit about the rainbow, but does not go into any kind of passage analysis or anything like that. And then the last two essays, which make up they're pretty long essays actually, is one called Seraphita, which is a novel by Balzac, and then Balzac and His Double is the last essay, which also deals with another Balzac novel called Louis Lambert. Now, both of those works are hard to find in English translation, but these are the works that Miller seems to find most interest in of Balzac's. But his essay is really more of a critique of Balzac himself, his personal life, the kind of suffering that he went through. And the one quote I wanted to bring here, because this is kind of an evaluation of Balzac, he says here this is at the end of the second essay. He says, "I have no respect for Balzac's Herculean labors," because Balzac wrote, I guess, tons of books, nor for his colossal output, nor for his genius, when I realize that his life sputtered out ingloriously. If a man cannot find salvation in himself, all his words are futile. The real Balzac died in the mythical person of Louis Lambert, whose very name he tells us he disliked. So it seems to me, and throughout this essay, he's criticizing Balzac not for his work, but for the life he led, but he's conflating these. He's saying it's important that the author, it's the word finds salvation in himself, or unless, if he doesn't, his words are futile. So that gives us, again, another perspective on the philosophy of writing that we get from Miller and the philosophy of life, which is really the dominant theme in all of Henry Miller's books. Henry Miller's The Wisdom of the Heart.